Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to Marriage RX, keeping your marriage healthy during a pandemic. I'm Pastor Brian Coffey, and this is my wife, Lorene, who's director of Chapel Street Women. Now, Marriage RX is simply an effort to encourage married couples as we all navigate through this seemingly endless season of COVID-19. Now, I know it feels like, at least starting to feel like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's been almost a year now, and we probably have a few more months to go before it's no longer considered a pandemic. But if you're able to join us for the first two sessions, we talked about the multiple stresses that the past year has put on families and especially on marriages. We talked about what couples might be able to do to cope with the stress by establishing some new routines and some new boundaries. And if you want to go back and watch either of those first two episodes, just go to chapelstreet.church/marriagerx and you can watch them there. Today, we want to talk about conflict, which is everyone's favorite subject. You might want to grab a notebook or a piece of paper and a pencil so you can write down a few notes, because there's things here that we're going to talk about that you might want to write down to refer to or talk about later.
So before we go any further, let's introduce our Chapel Street couples, our brave couples, again to you today. So let's start with, and just have you guys wave again, and we're going to have you interact with us in a minute. But just to our left up here on our screen is Ryan and Brenda Saul. If you'll wave to us and welcome back. And then Amy and Eric Elfman down to our left and bottom left here. And then on the bottom right for us, right below us, are Brandon and Carrie Peterson. So welcome back. So glad to have you with us again.
Well, I'm going to start this session with a little story. Way back in the day, I played college basketball, and I had a coach who liked to say, losing magnifies things. And we lost a lot. So he had lots of chances to say that phrase, losing magnifies things. And what he meant was that losing, at least in sports, or in my case, basketball, tends to create frustration and disappointment. And that frustration eventually causes friction between teammates, friction between coaches and players. And losing can erode confidence and trust. And it's really, really hard to maintain a positive atmosphere on a team and in those relationships, or to even continue to experience the joy of playing a game when you're losing, because losing magnifies things.
You know, and one of the things I've talked about with a lot of friends, and maybe you've felt this too, is that COVID has magnified things, especially hard things. I think we've felt the losses have been harder. The frustrations have been harder. The stresses have just been harder, and things have been multiplied. And so when we've spent time together, living together, working together, going to school together, even going to church here together, all these things happening in our homes, things have just been multiplied, and we've lost the outlets that we've had when we felt the stresses, the frustrations. Sometimes in the past, pre-COVID, we've been able to take those frustrations out through working out places, or through being with friends, or going to the movies, or out to coffee, to coffee shops, or shopping, or whatever it is that we are able to kind of let out those frustrations. And the result is we're living in an atmosphere that's really primed for conflict. And so the question we have for all of you that we'd love to just interact with is, has the season of COVID created more tension for each of you and conflict than usual in your marriages? And if so, how so? So I know we're asking you to be very candid with us, and appreciate you doing so. But let's start, Carrie and Brandon, let's just start and jump in with you. How has this created more tension and conflict than usual in your marriage? Or has it? And if so, how has it created that?
Well, like you said at the beginning, this has been going on for almost a year now. So, there's going to be some ups and downs. And has it created more conflict? I would say on a macro level, no. On a micro level, where there's more situations where there is conflict, probably, yeah. There's more, when you spend more time together, there's going to be a higher chance of, little maybe spats. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would say it's created some more conflict more situational conflict, I'd say.
It's created a lot more things that we've had to communicate about and have conversations about, whether it's, between the two of us or about our family and the kids. But we feel fortunate that we talked about this. We're both kind of on the same level or the same idea of how we feel about COVID and whether we're going to leave the house or, go and do things, allow our kids to play sports, things like that. So that's been nice that we've been on that same. I'm sure not everybody is. Some people might have one spouse who feels one way and the others feels the other way. But it's created more conversations, I would say, where we've had to work through little things.
Yeah. I remember Eric, you saying something that, or Brandon, you said something that Eric said, I remember in one of our sessions, that because you're around each other more, you have more opportunity to say something that could be something you have to work through. So Eric and Amy, tell us a little bit, has it created more tension, conflict, and what's that look like for you guys if it has?
I think honestly, initially it was the opposite. It was kind of like, while we were dealing with teaching in a weird way, we were getting this gift of a lot of time together, which we usually don't have in this kind of our toughest part of the year, at least for my schedule. So that was nice. Once we started to head back towards like, oh, actually we're really going to school in some fashion in the fall, then things started to ratchet up here and there when we were trying to figure out schedules, who's going to be where, all of the things that, normally happen at the beginning of the school year, like, okay, what's all the activities? What's all those things? Still, in a way, the same issues were coming up. Like, okay, who's going to be in charge of driving this kid? Who's going to go here and there? And trying to figure those things out, I would say, were some of the conflicts. I don't know. What else do you think?
Yeah, I think also, Marie, I thought you explained it really well, where you usually have a larger support system, whether it's in terms of carpooling. So that's something that's easy, where it's like, well, this family's going to drive there and we're going to drive home. But if we're not really doing that, then that's an extra stressor. Or, in terms of relationally, we're so thankful. We love our friends so much, but I love to be together with them in person. And so when that was limited, then you kind of feel like, I know I put a lot of pressure on Eric, like, I have so many words and you're so lucky you're going to get all of them. That may have caused some conflict for Eric.
Yeah, I think that's a common one. Yep. Thank you. Thanks. And Saul, how about you guys?
Well, I'd probably say in the beginning, it was great. It was a staycation at home. It was nice, spend time together. But I quickly found out that Brenda had her own routines at home, and she did things and kept things in order. And of course, me being the guy, I think that there's other ways to do things. And so I'm a meddler, and also like to micromanage. So it did take.
It's a nice combination, actually.
Yeah. It's a great combination, but it took a lot of reminding. I would call it reminding, and some conflict to say you don't need to do that. So. We worked through it. It just, at the beginning, me venturing into her routines, it became a challenge for sure. But then we learned our rhythm in the new normal, and I learned to stay out of the meddling and micromanaging to an extent, best I could. So.
Well, and it's some of the silliest things because we are home so much. And for me, I'm a hairdresser, so I can work at home some, but there was a lot of months where I wasn't having people come in my home, so I'm bored and not doing as much as usual. And I mean, little things, poor guy, he's just trying to help, and he may be switching loads of laundry, or he made the bed, and I'm like, but what am I going to do today? So just things like that, like step off, this is my stuff. Or I've also become overly possessive of my very few hours a week that the kids go in person to school. And so should he want to, at this point now, he kind of works from home or kind of goes in. So should he want to work from home on a day when the kids are gone? That's like, why do you need to be here today? Like, this is my day. It's like, because I get like 3 hours. So I remember one of the first days they went, he worked from home, and then I was going to go for a jog, and he said, I'll come with you. And I was like, what? Why? We don't run the same pace, and I'm going to have headphones in. And then he just wanted to chat with me, and I'd have to take my headphone out. What? So.
It's getting those new routines down.
Usually I want him to come home. That sounds bad, but after a while I was like, are you going to work today or what?
I think there's I think I remember seeing a Modern Family episode where Phil wanted to run with Claire and it turned into this giant conflict, and very, very funny. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting what each of you kind of referred to.
That's great.
Like at the beginning, it felt like a little bit of a gift, like, oh, we're forced to be home. We just can stay here. And that felt kind of good. Like kind of a bunker mentality. We're going to work in this together. We're going to survive this together. But as the months kind of dragged on, a certain kind of fatigue sets in, and the small, tiny little things that you might overlook become a little more irritating. And that's what the losing magnifies things was about. And pretty soon you feel tension and just because you're around. And we talked about in one of the last sessions, normally we all have kind of a rhythm to life, apart together. And so you have a little decompression zone naturally when you leave the house or you're not in the same space. But this season has disrupted all those rhythms. And my guess is for some people watching, it's been maybe more difficult and more volatile than each of what you guys are saying. But we've all experienced a little bit of that, and how eventually after 6 months or 8 months, smaller things having to do with the dishes or routines or space,
Alone time. Yeah.
and alone time can become annoying and then become conflicts. And depending on how you deal with them, they can be more difficult. But we can relate to that. We've had mostly this has been a good time for us, but here and there we've had moments that kind of surprised us, like where'd that come from? How much stress are we really feeling here? But we all know that we like to say that conflict is inevitable in marriage. Just leaving aside COVID and leaving aside quarantining, conflict is inevitable because there's no such thing as a conflict-free marriage. So if you guys watching this have had conflicts like we've talked about, or maybe having a conflict right now, you had one today, then just join the club because conflict's inevitable. But we found over the years, as we've talked with so many couples, that often it's not really that the conflict that's the issue. A lot of times it's how we have the conflict that's the greater issue. Psychologists and counselors have worked and tried to identify primary conflict styles that people in our culture have. That is due to personality or what we learned in our home growing up. We develop kind of a preferred style of conflict, sort of a default mode when we go into conflict. And we want to mention just briefly 4 of those styles. And here's where, if you're watching this, you might want to use your paper and jot these down so you can try to identify what your own personal style is and what your partner's style is, because we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in here with this first one because this is our style. We're both avoiders, and the first style is avoidance or denial. So avoiders are uncomfortable with conflict. We'll tend to ignore or deny that there's an issue, and we just hope it goes away. As to now, the positive side of avoidance is people who avoid conflict tend to have peaceful homes. It's pretty calm, pretty stable. The negative side, obviously, is that things are underlying and that it can lead to distance, it can lead to detachment. Things will tend to pile up internally and get worse, and things can eventually blow up at some point, but that's avoidance.
Yeah. Second one I'll mention is what we call accommodating. Now, when conflict comes up, an accommodator is willing to give in rather quickly to whatever his partner wants or needs in order just to keep the peace. On the positive side, just like with avoidance, accommodators are really easy to live with. They're like teddy bears because they don't fight for themselves. On the negative side, accommodators have a tendency to store up frustration and resentment that eventually can turn into bitterness as it goes underground and produces the phenomenon that I like to call the exploding teddy bear, where nobody knows where that came from, but he or she's been sitting on it for a long, long time. That's the accommodator.
And then the third style is the competing style. These are people that when conflict happens, they want to win. So the upside of this is generally these people are communicate in a way that's very loud and clear. They're very open about what they want and where they stand. And the upside is you don't have to question, you don't have to wonder about what they think or feel. Now, the downside of the competing style is that those who have this style it can lead to harsh words being said, or even destructive anger can come out of it that leads to blaming or attacking or name calling. There can be very blanket statements can be used like you never or you always, again, often said out of anger from somebody who wants to compete to win.
And the fourth style we'll mention is collaboration. Those who collaborate are always looking to work together to find a kind of win-win solution. They don't avoid, they don't always give in, they don't try to win, but they do try to solve and try to come to a reasonable solution. Now, obviously here, couples don't often share the same style. It's like speaking a different language. You can have two avoiders like us in a relationship, and we go long periods of time without any conflict. And then when one pops up, sometimes we have 6 or 8 issues to deal with because they're all just sitting in a pile. Or you can have one avoider and one who competes, and you have lots of one-sided conflicts in that case. Or you can have 2 who compete. And I've counseled with a lot of those couples, and they're fantastic to watch because they're loud and they can be volatile and they can have really good marriages and really good relationships, but they have a conflict every day and they don't mind, and they get them over with. All kinds of combinations, and it makes a difference in how you experience and deal with conflict. So let me ask you guys, as you've been listening, how would you identify your own conflict styles? Are you similar in dealing with conflict, or do you have very different styles, and what's that look like in your marriage? Let's see, who wants to start? Let's go backwards. Let's go Ryan and Brenda.
Well, I'm thinking of these 4. I don't know if I can categorize this. I mean, I think we collaborate, but we each know very well our little, in that collaboration, what's going to happen. So I'm probably going to pose the issue first. Ryan's going to get defensive. And then I'm going to get irritated that he's defensive instead of really hearing what I'm saying. And then and then a little later, he's going to think it through, and then we're going to work it through very well. I don't know. I think that he just comes from a place of, I don't know if it's a guy thing. He just wants to fix. Well, okay, fine. Well, whatever. I'm going to fix it. And sometimes I don't need it fixed. I just want you to hear what I'm saying, and I want a hug. I don't know, but.
So you guys have kind of a little conflict dance. And it kind of follows that's not unusual. I mean, we're a little bit like that as well in terms of who usually brings it up or who usually notices. Our conflicts, since we both avoid, start with one of us saying, "Are you upset? Or is something wrong?" Mm-hmm. And we're capable of saying, "No, I'm fine," for like weeks at a time early on. And then we slowly have cut that time down. But that's your little dance. So you bring something up, there's a little bit of defensiveness and some time, some space, then figuring it out, and you resolve it.
But I would say our whole thing, I mean, we couldn't do a few weeks like that. I think we both agree we can't really get through the day if we're not okay. So if something's going on, whatever's going to take the day to sort it out, and it'll be sorted out. It's rare that goes longer. Don't you think?
That's true. I do think it's funny. I was going through all of those, and I think in both of us, we can have a little piece of every one of those at certain times. So that's a really good dance when you got a little bit of every one of those.
Well, yeah, and any categories like this are a little falsely created. I mean, I think a lot of people can pick and choose depending on the conflict and how they feel at the moment. These are just kind of a conversation starter. So let's jump down to Eric and Amy. What's your conflict dance look like?
We are, first of all, extremely similar to you guys. We're both avoiders. We will let something just simmer until, it's burnt to a crisp. But eventually, once our dance goes like this, once it does come up, I get very anxious and I am prone to yelling. And Amy wins by not yelling, by keeping her voice extremely even the entire time.
You don't lose if you don't yell.
Yes. And that
annoying.
makes me more frustrated because I feel like do you even care that this is a problem? You are saying things at a very like apathetic level.
And I get quieter and quieter the angry I am.
But that, that has been like something to learn, at least for me, because when I know that she's upset, it's when the quietness is happening.
It's very
It's
rare
like,
because I
wait
talk
a
so
second.
much.
We have not spoken for like 2 hours today.
Uh-oh.
Something is happening.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I think too, as avoiders, we have in the last, I'd say, I don't know, 10 years, maybe been like slowly chopping that time down. We
Yeah.
recognize this in ourselves and been trying to encourage one another to bring a problem up when it's a problem and not 3 months later.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Slow dance.
So what'd you say, Eric?
Slow dance.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly kind of the progress we made. So when he said weeks, early on in our
Early on, yeah.
marriage, it would take weeks. And I think now what was weeks over years became days, became hours now, you know, and because it is the kind of thing where we don't want to go days. But it's hard work and it takes a lot of effort and it takes and same that it's very easy for me to pull back and get very quiet when something's wrong. I don't think I whisper though when I'm angry.
No.
You might have to teach lessons on how to do that, Amy.
I do like that tactic though.
Brandon, Carrie, what's your styles?
You know, I think it's interesting how you guys have said how things have changed over the years that you've been married and become more seasoned as a couple, because I think the same has happened with us. I think in the beginning, we both got married a little bit later in life. So we had our ways, we were kind of set in them. And I think we both kind of came at it, kind of competing because we had our ways and what we thought was the right way. And I would say that our conflicts would escalate, you know, because I would think I was right, he would think he was. And I think over time, though, we've learned that we're never going to get anywhere that way, because we did say hurtful things, probably more so me. I would use those blanket words, always, you always are this. And he would always stop me and be like, I'm always, and I'd have to try to backtrack that, but it was too hard in the moment. I was so mad. I'm like, yeah, you always, you know. So we were never getting anywhere with it. So I think over time, though, we've kind of realized, all right, if I do this, it's going to really get her going. Or if I say this, that's what's going to spark his, you know, anger more. And so we've just kind of learned over the time. And I don't know if maybe now we're more accepting, maybe like I don't know, kind of accepting. I know he's upset right now. So we'll just kind of, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I would say a little bit of all of them that you've mentioned, but I think things have changed over time. So I think, you know, as newlyweds, we didn't know how to get through these things because, you know, not having lived together before, you know, it's a different vibe when you're always together and you have to solve your problem because neither one's going anywhere. So, and especially now with COVID, you know, we're together more with him working from home. So it has been interesting how, you know, we have dealt with conflict. Just
yeah, I would say too, I mean, like, you know, from a guy's perspective, you kind of have to like become that teddy bear here and there. You know, I mean, you gotta like, no, you gotta pick your spots. I mean, sometimes you just gotta like, you know, hey, it's just fine, you win.
He's just always looking forward to the makeup afterwards.
No, yeah, okay. No, but like, okay.
There we go again.
Right. Here we go. No.
I know.
But sometimes you gotta like, you know, just let it be. Just, I don't know, just turn the other cheek.
Yeah, well, I think that you're getting to the next question we wanted to ask, which is, I guess the way I'd ask it is, if you were, we had two of our sons are married now, and they've not asked us for advice on conflict. But imagine that your kids would get married, or a younger couple, you have friends, and they ask you, what have you learned about doing conflict well? What are the keys to growing and doing it better the longer you're married, rather than having it get worse? Because there are only two ways conflict goes. It either gets worse over time, in my experience, dealing with couples, and by the time they come in to see me or to talk to a pastor, it's like so much water under the bridge, or it gets better and couples get better at conflict. And the time it takes to deal with it shortens, and there's not as volatile, it's not as hurtful, and there isn't so much residue. So what have each of you maybe learned that's helped you do it better over time?
I'd probably say I'll go first. I'm definitely a yeller by nature. And I have figured out that being louder and yelling doesn't get the point across any better and does more damage. So I think that over time, that's definitely changed. That, in the beginning.
You don't yell at me.
No, I don't. But I'm just saying yelling in general about having conflict or argument. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
And early on, he would be able to go to sleep and kind of need to process everything and want to talk about it later. And I did not hear you list of one of your ways, talk it to death. That I didn't hear you say that one, but I like that one.
I'm going to write that one down.
Talk about it. I want to know we're fine, and then let's recap it, and then let's go over it one more time. So, he accepts that now. I mean, so that would be my advice, not to overtalk it, but maybe don't go to bed mad, and just be clear, communicate. Like, I think I just tell him, I need to feel like you hear me, or I need you to, I don't know. I just communicate what is important to me in those moments, I guess.
Well,
You're very good at being.
two really important things that you both said. One is, Ryan, you're learning that raising your voice tends to escalate the issue and is unproductive. And you saying that, Brenda, that don't go to bed angry. Try to get it through so it doesn't ruin the next day too. Now, how about anybody else? What have you learned that you think that's helped you do it better?
I'll go. I would say, if you're feeling symptoms, check the temperature.
There you go.
Right? Like, you can ignore that if you want, but if you feels like something's happening, just go ahead and ask, because either it's not, and then you're done, or we need to talk about this right now anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that, personally, I am not only conflict avoidant with my wife, just in general in life. I, not to go full Enneagram here, but I am a 9 to the 9th degree. And so I don't want to know what the problem is, because then I have to deal with it. So I've been trying to get better in that general, all across the board, but especially with Amy. If I see it, if it feels very quiet, I'm going to ask the question rather than hope it all goes away.
So does it start like, you seem quiet today?
It's a lot of, passing each other in public spaces in the home without any words, and that is a bad sign.
Have you seen that? There's a cute little commercial. I don't know what it's for, but it's a cute commercial where it opens with a woman sitting looking out a window, looking really forlorn, and her husband walks in and says, "What's wrong?" And she looks at him and says, really quietly and sadly, "Nothing," and looks back out the window. And then on the screen comes up this phrase, "Life is full of hidden problems." And he gets this helpless look on his face. He turns around and walks away like he has no idea what to do. But that catches, I think, some of what conflict is like. And you mentioned one of the things that we have gotten better at from our early days is sensing when something's wrong, rather than waiting for the other person to say something. Sensing it, say, something's off, what's going on. And we literally, early on, it would take a week or more. And now sometimes we will head it off before it happens.
Well, I think the other thing, one of the things I have had to learn, I wanted him to ask me what's wrong. And I've had to be able to grow in saying, I need to let you know what's wrong. And I think that's something that I think, it's just unfair, to him to say, read my mind, something's wrong. Or I can give you all the clues and cues, and we do, and that's not always wrong to do that. But I just think it's healthier in our marriage if I'm able to have the courage and clarity to be able to tell him if I'm feeling something wrong, to be honest about that and to say it to him. Then it's something he's always been willing to respond if he knows clearly what it is. It's much harder when he has to guess. It's always much harder when he has to guess and feels like he's walking on eggshells. So.
Yeah. Well, conflict, as we said earlier, is inevitable. I think all of us would agree. And it's just a matter of how far conflict either accelerates and gets worse over time, or we get better at it. And we have different styles, and maybe it's a mix of all these styles. But whatever the conflict is, or whatever the style is, I think healthy conflict resolution in marriage always requires the same things. And it requires courage, confession, grace, and forgiveness. It takes courage because conflict is always painful. No matter how small, no matter how quickly you can resolve it, there's always a moment of pain or fear to either bring it up or to get into it, or it hurts. And it takes courage to be the one to say, hey, I need to talk about something, or hey, what's wrong? It feels like something's wrong. It takes courage. It takes confession, because eventually each partner needs to be willing to consider their own part in the conflict. Conflict is very rarely one-sided, we've learned. And it takes grace, because we have to also be willing to listen to our partner and understand what they are feeling. That's what Brenda was talking about. And that's what's hard for me. I want to fix something to get past it. Sometimes I just need to understand and listen. And it takes grace, because grace leads to forgiveness and reconciliation. Listen to this passage from Ephesians. It's written by the Apostle Paul, and he's writing here to the church. But I think we can apply these same spiritual principles to marriage. I'm going to read it slowly so everybody can hear, but it's out of Ephesians chapter 4. And Paul writes, therefore, each of you, think of each of you, must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor or your husband or wife. For we are all members of one body. He's talking about the church, but we are also one in marriage. In your anger, do not sin. So there's a way to be angry without sinning. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. That's what Brenda said. Don't go to bed when you're still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. That's a scary thought. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Don't attack, don't name call, don't belittle, don't be defensive, don't yell, but only what is helpful for building others up, for building up your spouse and your marriage according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And then this verse, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you.
And so this scripture that Brian just read, it becomes kind of this blueprint for how we can deal with conflict in marriage. Speak truthfully, but without accusation or defensiveness. Don't allow that conflict to fester and become toxic, something that will become bitterness or even rage over time. Learn to forgive. And this is grace. This is grace. What a gift. Marriage is experiencing stress. Need to focus on extending grace to each other, the gift of understanding, of listening, of forgiveness, and serving each other.
So let's wrap up with a few concrete suggestions. And again, you can jot these down if you're listening. Make it a point to have regular check-ins. I think Eric was talking about this, but check in with each other weekly, maybe even daily, not because you have a conflict, but just to monitor the stress level, monitor what's happening in the emotional life of your partner, because this will keep issues, if there are any, from building too much steam, from building too much pressure. And we've learned you can actually head off many conflicts before they start to happen. So check in with each other. And when you do find yourself in conflict and you feel the temperature starting to rise, as Eric talked about, sometimes it helps us to take a little time out, like we do with our kids, but take an adult time out. Press pause, give each other a little space. Let's not do this now. Let's pause it. It allows each of you to process a little bit, to think, maybe to pray, to gain a little perspective, maybe a little spiritual clarity before sitting down to address the issues together. And then create a safe time and place. That is, both agree, hey, we're going to talk about this after dinner tonight, so we're prepared. So nobody gets surprised by an issue. And when you do sit down to work it out, there are steps to take. Identify the source of the conflict. Make sure you both agree that that is the conflict, that you're using the same language, you're agreeing that you're fighting about the same thing. That's a big deal. It's hard to have a conflict when you're fighting about two different things. Then reframe the conflict. And this is absolutely critical. It's hard to do when your emotions get involved, but reframe the conflict from me against you, who's going to win this, but rather you and me against this issue. So imagine yourself on the same team fighting a common opponent. That helps you gain perspective. It's not what you need to do to change to make me happy. It's what we need to do together to work through the issue. So don't avoid. We've learned that conflict doesn't magically disappear. Issues don't magically disappear. They just go underground and they wait for later, like toxic waste, right? They go underground. Don't accommodate. Sure, you can keep the peace, but there's a good chance you're going to store up some bitterness over time. Don't compete to win, because conflict's not a competition. Marriage isn't a competition, but move toward collaboration. And if you get stuck, if you're stuck in a place where the conflict just seems to be in a death spiral, then get help, get support, reach out to some trusted friends and talk together. Make an appointment with a pastor, get a counseling referral from Chapel Street's care department, but don't let conflict become toxic. So to wrap up, we want to thank all you guys again for joining us one more time. For those of you watching online, whenever it is, just one final word. Conflict happens. It just does. If you're married, it's going to happen, but it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. It doesn't have to be toxic. We believe God has given us all the tools we need in his word to turn conflict into growth and even into greater intimacy. It takes courage, confession, grace, and forgiveness. So we hope you'll join us again next time as we talk about emotional and spiritual health. So thanks for joining us for this episode of Marriage RX.